about to start our Al-Anon meeting. If you will come forward, please, and bring your coffee with you. May we open with a quiet time, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The Al-Anon family groups are a fellowship of relatives and friends of alcoholics who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other in order to solve the problem of living with an alcoholic. Adherence to the principle of personal anonymity at the public level is just as important for the relatives of an alcoholic as it is for the AA members. Perhaps more so because Al-Anon members are thus protecting someone else's identity, not merely their own. Up to the level of the press, radio, and TV, where all AAs are anonymous, it is the AA choice how anonymous he wishes to be with his friends and associates and other AAs. Relatives and friends should draw this same line. However, there is much more in the tradition than the protection of our dear ones. It places principles above personalities and assures us that no one will use Al-Anon for profit, prestige, or power. Hello. Hi. My name is Betty, and I am the wife of an alcoholic. I am a member of the Al-Anon family group. At this time, I would like to introduce to you a past delegate from the state of Texas. Her name is Arbutus, and I'll give her to you right now.
I would like all the Al-Anons to sit up real tall. Wiggle your ears or something so I'll know that you're out there. My name is Arbutus O'N. I am powerless over alcohol, and my life is unmanageable without the daily practice of the Al-Anon Family Group program, a program that was given to us by a bunch of ex-drunks who found sobriety and learned that the only way they can keep the things that are good and beautiful is to give them away. And when they looked around to find a group of people who needed this program even more than the alcoholics, they found us, the spouses of the spouses. You have to be sober to say that. The principles of this program saved my husband's life and the lives of many of my friends. The principles of this program gave me some degree of stability and make it possible for nearly 400,000 alcoholics to live useful, sober lives. I would begin this afternoon by thanking those responsible for inviting me here. And I must confess that I was surprised and very pleased when Joan called me. I met Joan very briefly last summer in Toronto, but there was 3,000 Al-Anons in Toronto, any one of whom would have been happy to share this your 6th anniversary, so I am pleased. And I would thank the program committee for arranging for me to speak in the afternoon. Did you know that I wasn't any good in the morning? Well, I'm not. I'm one of the night people. I tell my AA husband this is his fault too, that I got this way waiting up for him when he was drinking. Now, this isn't true, of course, but non-alcoholics get in the habit of blaming everything that goes wrong on the drinking. This relieves us of any responsibility for our own behavior. And some of us have to be in Al-Anon a long time before we really get honest. And I would thank the program for allowing me to speak at an open meeting. I have one disappointment. My husband could not come with me. I need that character. Other than that one disappointment, though, I have nothing else to complain about. Y'all have been tremendous, and I appreciate every bit of it. We've never attended an AA convention in this part of the country, but we have received some mighty fine AA down in Texas that came from Chicago. I expect everybody in the state of Texas knew and loved Dennis Wilson. He was a fine AA. And Bill thought you would like to know that in almost every clubhouse in the state of Texas you will find a scroll or a plaque hanging on the wall, the title of which is The Reason You Were Chosen for This Work. Now, for a long time, no one seemed to know where this came from, and Bill did a little research and learned that it came from Chicago. It's an excerpt from a talk that was made by the late John T., and it was on your 4th anniversary of AA here in Chicago that he delivered this talk, back in 1943. So AA has been around a while in Chicago. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this excerpt. It doesn't take long to read it, and with your permission, I would like to do this for my Bill. The reason you were chosen for this work. God in his wisdom selected this group of men and women to be the purveyors of his goodness. In selecting them through whom to bring about this phenomenon, he went not to the proud, the mighty, the famous, or the brilliant. He went instead to the humble, to the sick, to the unfortunate. He went right to the drunkard, the so-called weakling of the world. Well might he have said to us, unto your weak and feeble hands I have entrusted a power beyond estimate. To you has been given that which has been denied the most learned of your fellows. Not to scientists or statesmen, not to wives or mothers, not even to my priests or ministers, have I given this gift of healing other alcoholics that I entrust to you. It must be used unselfishly. It carries with it grave responsibility. No day can be too long, no demands upon your time too great. It must be used with tolerance, for I have restricted its application to no race, no creed, and no denomination. Personal criticism you must expect. Lack of appreciation will be common. Ridicule will be your lot. Your motives will be misjudged. You must be prepared for adversity, for what men call adversity is a ladder you must use to ascend the rungs toward spiritual perfection. And remember, in the exercise of this power, I will not exact from you beyond your capabilities. You are not selected because of exceptional talents. And be careful always, if success attends your efforts, not to ascribe to personal superiority that which you can lay claim only by virtue of my gift. If I had wanted learned men to accomplish this mission, the power would have been entrusted to the physician and the scientist. If I had wanted eloquent men, there would have been many anxious for the assignment. For talk is the easiest used of all talents with which I have endowed mankind. If I had wanted scholarly men, the world is filled with better qualified men than you who would be available. You were selected because you have been the outcast of the world, and your long experience as drunkards has made or should make you humbly alert to the cries of distress that come from the lonely hearts of the alcoholics everywhere. Keep ever in mind the admission you made on the day of your profession in AA, namely that you are powerless, and it was only with your willingness to turn your life and will into my keeping that relief came to you. I think no one has ever written a finer tribute to the members of AA. I like best of all to speak at open meetings because most Al-Anons know more about this program than I do. And I want to reach those of you who are here, who occasionally attend an open meeting with your AA spouse or a convention, but who do not really know the joy of sharing this beautiful way of life. I want to reach those of you who may have to accept the drinking of an alcoholic who will never stop drinking and who do not know where to find the courage necessary to live with these people. I want to reach those of you who do not know the fulfillment of literally putting a family back together again in the Al-Anon family groups. I hope a lot of you are here today, and I hope that you will soon join us. The Al-Anon family groups need you, and you need us. I'm what is known as a long-timer, formerly called an old-timer. It's been my privilege to work with alcoholics for many, many years, long before we had Al-Anon family groups. And I hope to do two things here this afternoon. I hope to comfort the disturbed, and I hope to disturb the comfortable. Every time I speak to a meeting, I am again conscious of one thing. Every one of you are here for exactly the same reason that I'm here, and the crowd gets bigger every year. Our lives have been affected by one of the oldest problems known to man, the problem of alcoholism. Alcoholism is not new. It's as old as time. I used to think it was a product of this generation, but this is not true. It's a complex disease that prompts the unthinking to make jokes about the drunk, but it can leave a family homeless and penniless. It's a public cancer that can turn a man or a woman against themselves. It's a blight on the history of mankind. The Bible warns against it. Shakespeare diagnosed it, and Tennessee Williams built a prize-winning play around it. But no one in these other generations seemed to be able to do anything about alcoholism. The priests and the ministers were baffled at their inability to cope with this insidious habit, this dreadful malady that turned otherwise honorable men and women away from everything that was good and decent. They prayed over the alcoholic. They preached to him. They forced him to sign pledges. And when these things failed, they damned his soul to hell. The men of science in other generations tried to find a cure for alcoholism. They wanted to find a pill or a vaccine that would stop compulsive drinking. And failing to do this, they said to the medical students, don't waste your time on these worthless people. They're hopeless. Preachment failed, and there was no cure. So there was only one other thing they knew to do with the alcoholic. He must be punished. So they locked them up in jail. The longer they drank, the longer they stayed in jail. And the longer they stayed in jail, the drunker they got when they were finally released. It became a vicious circle. They tried to change the body chemistry of sick people with punishment. And we'll never know how many sick alcoholics died in the jails across our country at the hands of sadistic jailers. And society permitted this to happen. Nay, we insisted on it to our everlasting shame. Neither punishment nor preachment could solve the problem of alcoholism, and there was no treatment. But there was one group of people who never quite gave up on the alcoholic. That was the families of the alcoholic and their friends, people who loved you. We took jobs to feed the children that you were too sick to be responsible for. We doctored your hangovers. Some of us bought your liquor. We picked up your hot checks. We bailed you out of jails. We pled with judges. We said John's a good man when he's sober. And to complete the paradox, we gave you hell every time you got drunk. And society was puzzled that we continued to love and care for the alcoholic. There were those that thought we were endowed with some special quality that made us better than other people. They gave us nice shiny halos to wear. You can find those halos discarded in almost any Al-Anon group that you care to visit. You're welcome to wear them. They're not very comfortable. And there were people, of course, who thought we were plain fools to live under such circumstances. My mother came in this group. She used to say, God looks after fools and drunkards, and that takes care of Arbutus and Bill. And Mother was right. God did look after us. And of course the professionals felt that we were masochistic, that we enjoyed suffering and the suffering of others. And society was puzzled by one other thing. Many brilliant people were alcoholics. And this is what saved our skin. These talented, brilliant people held the attention of an indifferent society until help came along. Did you ever think of that? Alexander the Great was an alcoholic. He had conquered the whole known civilized world when he was 33 years old, and he wept because there was no more worlds to conquer. But he could not conquer his desire to drink, and he died prematurely in an alcoholic convulsion. Stephen Foster was an alcoholic. The sweet singer of songs who gave the world its most beautiful folk music was a compulsive drinker. It seemed to come on him like an illness, his wife once said, and so it does. They found him sick unto death in the New York Bowery, and when he was dead, they found in his pockets exactly 38 cents. 1 cent for each year of a misspent life, and the lyrics to another song. Stephen Foster loved his wife, his Jeannie with the light brown hair, but the love of his wife could not stop his drinking, and he died drunk. Robert Louis Stevenson was an alcoholic. He could weave the magic of children's stories, and he all but destroyed himself in the magic that he found in a bottle. It could have been a quart of gin or a fifth of vodka. And he describes this personality change of the alcoholic in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I watched this personality change right in my own living room. You saw it too. You saw the bottle change the man you love or your beautiful wife into a babbling idiot, into a degenerated animal, into a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, history tells us little about the families of these men and others like them, but I know the fear and the loneliness that Jeannie knew when she waited for her restless, talented husband to come home from one of his sprees. And I know the homesickness that Fanny Stevenson knew when she left her home in California to go to the South Sea Islands with her husband in hopes that he might regain his health. Robert Louis Stevenson had a dual problem. He was also tubercular. And I know the joy that she knew when his body became strong and well again. And I know the serenity that they both knew when he found sobriety. They lived happily for many years in the South Seas. And when Robert Louis Stevenson died, the natives made a shrine of his burial place. If you go there today, you can read the epitaph he wrote himself on his tomb. Under the wide and starry sky, dig a grave and let me lie. Glad did I live and gladly die, and I lay me down with a will. And this be the verse you grave for me. Here he lies where he longed to be. Home is the sailor, home from the sea, and the hunter home from the hill. Now, in our generation, in our lifetime, it is no longer necessary for an alcoholic to die in drunken ignorance, as did Stephen Foster. It is no longer necessary for an alcoholic to go to a South Sea island in order to find sobriety, because we are doing things about the disease of alcoholism. Clergymen now feel that alcoholics are God's children too, and they send them to AA for treatment, and they send their families to us so they can get well too. The American Medical Association classifies alcoholism as a treatable illness, and now an alcoholic can get in a hospital. I don't know what your situation has been up here, but 10 years ago you couldn't get an alcoholic in a hospital in the state of Texas. Not unless the doctor was willing to jeopardize his license and say something else was wrong. Now we have alcoholic wards in all of our state hospitals, and many private hospitals treat alcoholics. County judges send alcoholics to AA instead of sending them to jail. And we have wonderful rehabilitation programs in our federal penitentiaries under the auspices of AA. National Council on Alcoholism has launched a tremendous educational program to teach the public about alcoholism. Magazines and newspapers write articles about alcoholism. And all of these things are wonderful. I'm grateful for every bit of the effort that's being made. But we're not getting the job done. Now, don't misunderstand me. I would not low rate our professional friends. I have great respect for their training and for their good intentions. I'm simply saying to you that they do not know all there is to know about alcoholism. But at this moment, I am looking at a room full of experts. You are the real authorities on alcoholism. And this is a job for you to do, for you and for me. Our responsibility is grave, and our instructions are clear. I learned this several years ago when I was invited to speak at an Al-Anon rally in Detroit, Michigan. I was excited about this meeting and a little frightened as I am this afternoon, and I wanted to do a good job. And while I was getting some material ready to present at this meeting, I read again in my husband's copy of the Big AA book, the chapter To the Family Afterward. Now, I had read this chapter many times before, but on this particular occasion, there was one paragraph that hit me right between the eyes. It seemed as if it were written in italics. And this paragraph has never let me rest from that day until this, believe me. This paragraph has caused me to travel literally thousands of miles to talk to people like you. Now, you're not going to remember what I say here this afternoon, and it doesn't matter. But I want you to go home and read this paragraph. If your copy of the Big AA book is the same as ours, you'll find this paragraph on page 137. If your copy is different, read the whole chapter. It'll be good spiritual exercise. This is what the paragraph says. The past is the principal asset of the alcoholic's family, and frequently it is almost the only one. This painful past can be of infinite value to families still struggling with their problem. We feel that each family which has been relieved owes something to those who have not, and when the occasion requires, each member of it should be only too willing to bring former mistakes, no matter how grievous, out of their hiding places. Showing others how we were given health is the only thing that makes our life worthwhile. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, your dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert death or misery for them. End of paragraph. Does this leave any question in your mind about what your responsibility is to the families of the alcoholic? Does this leave any doubt in your mind about how you can show your gratitude for the sobriety in your own home and for the good things that sobriety has brought to you? It doesn't leave any question in my mind, and it dispels all doubt. If we have visitors here this afternoon, I hope you will not feel that we exaggerate the seriousness of this problem, because as God is my witness, we do not. Alcoholism has invaded all of our homes. Some of the alcoholics are sober, and some are not. Some of us have suffered grave financial damage as a result of alcoholism, which is a nice way to say we've been cold and hungry. Some of us have suffered physical abuse at the hands of the alcoholic. And all of us have suffered grave emotional damage as a result of alcoholism. We have one thing in common. And I know what you see here this afternoon. I see it too. You see a room full of happy people, well-dressed, well-fed, but it was not always this way. But do not fear, my noble friends, that this task will be too great for your capabilities. Do not fear that you will be inadequate to the task, great as it is. You need no special training. You simply need a compassionate heart and the willingness to share your experience, strengths, and hope, one with the other, in love, as I do this afternoon. I attended my first AA meeting in Amarillo, Texas in 1948. My husband had learned about AA in Fort Worth, Texas in 1945. And I would like to be able to tell you that he hasn't had a drink since, but this isn't true. My Bill was in AA for 6 years before he found sobriety. I didn't want to go to this meeting in Amarillo. I didn't know very much about alcoholics in those days, and I could see no constructive purpose to be served in associating ourselves with a group of people who, by their own admission, had ruined everything they'd ever touched. They'd ruined their own lives. They'd lost their families. They'd failed in business. Some of them had done terrible things and had been in jail. I didn't want to associate with this kind of people. I was having enough trouble. But I did go to the meeting, and for this I shall be forever grateful. This was an open meeting, and we met in a rather large room. There was about 100 people there. And after we were seated in the meeting room, a lovely little lady that I learned later was a member of AA leaned across Marguerite and whispered to me. Marguerite was the friend who had taken me to the meeting. And she said to me, "How long has it been since you had a drink, honey?" I wasn't in such a great shape myself. To be perfectly frank with you, I was just 2 jumps ahead of a fit. And I was going to answer her question. I hesitated a moment to remember when I'd had a drink. But Marguerite was terribly embarrassed. She said, "Mrs. O'Neill is not an alcoholic." Mrs. O'Neill is not an alcoholic, but she is familiar with the disease of alcoholism. Now, in order to tell you this story this afternoon, I must of necessity make references to alcoholics. I have already told you that my husband's name is Bill, and he is an alcoholic. And now I must tell you that my dad was an alcoholic. And my youngest brother is a practicing alcoholic. Dad was one of those people who never quite made this program, and he wanted to. He used to say to us, "How do you get the want to?" And we couldn't answer his question. Can you? How do you get the want to? For many years, after I gained the courage to ask the God of my understanding for personal favors, I closed my day with one prayer. God, don't let my dad die drunk. My father died last year, the 8th day of April. He had cancer of the esophagus. He didn't die drunk. And I want to tell you how it was possible for me to tell my daddy goodbye. The O'Neills are not poor folks. We're just always broke. And last year was no exception. 2 of the girls were attending university. Our only son had started on a new job, and everybody was spending a lot of money, and no one was making very much. And I got a telephone call from my brother, who told me that Dad wanted me to come home. I knew Dad was seriously ill, but I kept hoping that maybe he had a chance, and he didn't. And I knew why Dad wanted me to come home. The last time he'd been in Texas, he'd stayed drunk. And he'd said some pretty ugly things to me and to the children, and it didn't bother us, but it bothered Dad. So I got up the next morning. It was one of those gray spring days. The sun couldn't quite decide to shine, threatening to rain. Completely off the program. You know the kind of day I'm talking about. Your hair hurts, your skin doesn't fit, you can't put your shoes on. And I didn't have sense enough to turn this problem over to God, so he had to just reach out and get it. The telephone rang, and I answered, and it was Henry Townsend, down in Greenville, South Carolina, a good Al-Anon friend. And he said, "Arbutus, we want you to speak at our AA convention in Greenville. Can you do it?" And I said, "When is it, Henry?" And he said, "The 3rd day of April." And the wheels started going around in my head. I figured I could make arrangements to leave my family for a weekend. Our oldest daughter was expecting her twins, and she wasn't getting along very well. So I said to Henry, I'll do it on one condition, that I may be allowed to speak to the convention crowd and leave immediately. And I told him why. And he said, honey, you can come on any condition. And this is what I did. An AA committee bought me a plane ticket to the East Coast, only a few hundred miles from where my father lived. And I was able to spend the last few days of his lifetime at his bedside. He died 30 minutes after they called me back to Texas. The minister that conducted my father's funeral could find nothing more appropriate to use than the poem Thanatopsis. My dad loved this poem, and he could repeat it word for word, no matter how drunk he got. And those of you who are familiar with the works of William Cullen Bryant will remember the closing lines. So live that when thy summons come, thou go not like a quarry slave at night, scourged to his dungeon, but sustained and soothed by an unfaltering trust. Approach thy grave like one who wraps the draperies of his couch about him and lies down to pleasant dreams. I do not tell you these things about my father that you may weep for him. He's all right now. He doesn't have to drink anymore. I tell you these things that you may know that I have always loved an alcoholic. And because I love the alcoholic, I want to restore his family, because I know that of all the things that are dear to the hearts of the alcoholic, he loves his family most. Even when he tears us down over and over and over again, he loves his family most. I was not concerned with the drinking when Bill and I were married. I drank with Bill, and we had a wonderful time. We got drunk in Saratoga, Kalamazoo, Chicago, St. Louis, San Antonio. And the people that worked with us were all about the same age, and everybody had a ball. And then in 1940, two things happened to make Bill and me grow up. We became parents, and the world became involved in a war. I no longer drank with Bill. Things suddenly became too serious. We had our second child the next year, and Bill was not there when Nancy was born. She came on Wednesday, and she saw her daddy on Sunday. And when Bill came to the hospital with the usual paraphernalia that you men bring to your wives when they have new babies, he caused a great deal of commotion in the hospital. He wanted to teach the Catholic nun who was in charge of the maternity ward at the Good Samaritan Hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Texas song. And the good sister didn't want to dance. When he left the hospital that afternoon at the insistence of the doctor and with the help of two big burly orderlies, he sat down on the streetcar track in full view of my window, forced the motorman to stop so he could tell him about our new baby girl. Perfectly logical. Bill was still having fun with his drinking. Our only son was born the next year, and this time the trip to the delivery room was a little bit different. Something went wrong, and they needed Bill. And they couldn't find Bill. Now, had they asked me, or had I been able to talk to them, I could have told them that Bill was in a bar. But I didn't know which one. Sometimes I argue with my good AA friends, and they tell me there is no loneliness in the world as great as that of the alcoholic who has run out of time. But I think I know about loneliness. The loneliness of an alcoholic's wife when she goes to a delivery room with the full knowledge that a compulsion to drink is depriving her of her husband's devotion. The lonely task of keeping the spirit of Christmas alive for small children whose father has forgotten what day it is. And the crawling fingers of loneliness that you feel when you wait by the hospital bed of an injured child and you hear her cry for her daddy, and you can't find her daddy. This, my friends, I believe, is loneliness. Our son was a frail little boy. They told us he'd never walk. Alcoholics are sensitive people. I have watched Bill stand by this child's crib, this golden-haired little boy of ours who couldn't kick, and go get drunk. Mrs. O'Neill is not an alcoholic, but she is familiar with the disease of alcoholism. The drinking progressed, and Bill started having personality clashes with the people he worked for, and he changed jobs often. One of these jobs took us to Knoxville, Tennessee during the war. And days would go by when we didn't see each other. Now, we weren't separated, not physically. Bill worked for Holland Furnace Company. It was necessary for him to make calls on customers in the evening. And I'd hear him come in at night. He slept in another room. And I'd hear him go out early the next morning. But we didn't talk to each other. There wasn't anything to talk about except the drinking. And neither of us wanted to discuss that. This was a good job that Bill had. It was not unusual for him to make $500 or $600 in a week. And we were evicted from a furnished house that rented for $50 a month for non-payment of rent. Houses were hard to find in Knoxville, so we had to move up into Kentucky 70 miles away in order to find a garage apartment. And I was expecting our fourth child, and when I checked into the local hospital, I learned that it was for the exclusive use of the coal mining employees that lived in that area, and that I was not eligible to go there to be delivered of my child. About the time I made this wonderful discovery, they carried Bill home. Now, they'd carried him home before, but this time his leg was broken. So we had a cast put on the leg, and we started to Cincinnati, Ohio on a Greyhound bus. This is a part of the story that I don't like to tell, but my husband insists on it. He says it's real good for the high-bottom drunks. Peggy was 3, and Nancy was 2, and our son couldn't walk, and Bill had this enormous cast on his leg. And I was going to Cincinnati to get help from my mother. I went to Mother reluctantly because she couldn't stand Bill. Mother's only 12 years older than my husband, and she hated him with a passion. And that bus driver was most relieved when we reached Cincinnati, Ohio. Our fourth child, another little girl, was born in the charity ward of the Salvation Army Hospital. And this was not the last of the eviction notices that I was to see. And each time I saw the look of pity and disgust on the faces of those who served them. And I was to know about welfare agencies. When I was forced at last to go to a welfare agency for food for my children and treatment for my young son. And again, I was to see the look of pity and disgust on the social worker's face when she wrote on my application blank in bold black letters as if I couldn't read, "Husband is a drunkard." Mrs. O'Neill is not an alcoholic, but she is familiar with the disease of alcoholism. And when I came to Texas 23 years ago, I want you to know I had never heard this term in reference to my husband's drinking. And I had never heard the term illness. But I think I knew even then that Bill was compelled to drink. He drank when it was important for him to be sober. He lost his left eye and his left arm in 2 separate accidents as a result of drinking, and he couldn't stop. He lost his self-respect and the confidence of his friends, and he couldn't stop. He almost died as a result of drinking, and he could not stop. And I watched this happen, and I could do nothing to help him. At this point, I would like to say something directly to the alcoholics in this room. I know how rough the physical torture is that you endure, and I think I know about the devastating mental anguish. But I want you to know that it don't hold a light to this feeling of hopeless inadequacy that those who love you feel and must endure. It doesn't hold a light. Those of you who are parents know this feeling to some degree. It's the feeling you have when you tend a sick child. The child is burning up with fever and its little body's racked with pain, and it cries, and you want to help the child. With every fiber of your being, you want to take away the pain and make the child well again, but you can't, because the child can't tell you where he hurts. And the alcoholic couldn't tell us where they hurt, and we couldn't help them. Did you ever try to help an injured animal, a dog perhaps, the broken leg? You try to help the animal, it bites you? The pain is so great you couldn't let us help you. It was like you put us on the other side of a thick glass wall, and we could see you, and we could hear you. We could hear your cries of pain, but we couldn't get to you. You wouldn't let us. And this tears the insides out of us. It reduces us to less than nothing. It makes life a living death. It makes it hell on earth, because you want to help, and you can't. Because of this compulsion, Bill and I started a new kind of education, an education that touches every facet of human relations. And in the pursuit of this education, I learned many things, and I met many people. I learned to have faith in God. I learned to trust my fellow man. And I learned to have confidence in my husband's sobriety. Now, the first of these people that we met, of course, were the members of AA. And I shall never forget the first AA member that talked to me. He came to my home in the middle of the afternoon, and he explained to me what I termed then as this rehabilitation program for the alcoholic. And I was interested and excited in the things he was telling me, and after about 2 hours, I asked him a question. I said, "What do you have in this rehabilitation program of yours for the wives and the children of the alcoholics?" And he couldn't answer my question. I don't think anyone had ever asked him this before. He said, "We don't have anything for the wives and the children of the alcoholics, Mrs. O'Neill. You do not have a problem." At that moment, I could not wear sleeves on my arms because of a rash that the doctor said was caused by nerves. I was literally so nervous that I couldn't stand in my own shoes, and this good man told me I did not have a problem. I thought he was wrong. I still think he was wrong. And I believe that afternoon, subconsciously, I made a promise that someday, somehow, I would find a way to help the families of the alcoholics. And by the grace of God, that opportunity came. Because then I met another group of people. This was a very special group of non-alcoholics whose lives had been most dreadfully affected by the disease of alcoholism. This devastating emotional damage made it necessary, vitally necessary, for them to practice the principles of the recovery program in order to restore their sanity and to preserve their own stability. These people entertain the same fears as does the alcoholic. These people nourish the same resentment as does the alcoholic. These people cultivate the same self-pity and develop the same personality defects as does the alcoholic. There was only one difference. They did not have the allergy to alcohol. And this was the most revolting development of all, because this meant that they could not find escape in a bottle. This meant that they had to take their punishment standing up, cold sober. Some of these people seem to have been born with an understanding heart, and the others seem to have acquired this understanding because they had lived with a serious illness and sometimes with tragedy. And I seem to know these people and to be drawn to them. They had the ability to make my life just a little bit better because they were there. They could give me the courage to face life one day at a time. These people in time came to be called Al-Anon. May their tribe increase. And when I came to these people, I was physically, mentally, and spiritually destitute. I had no faith in God. Oh, I believed there was a God, a supreme being, a creator of the universe, if you please, who changed the seasons and turned the days into nights, and hung up the stars to make it pretty. And I thought he put people here. And then he let us go to hell backward. And I know now, of course, that I tried to pray. And I think he heard me when I cried, "Oh, God." I think he knew that I didn't have the words that prayers are made of. And I think he listens very carefully to the prayers of the amateurs and to the prayers of the alcoholics, because he knows that we don't have the courage to speak aloud. And he knew why I didn't trust people. I couldn't even trust myself. I was not responsible for the things that I did, and I was not responsible for the things that I said. And my 4 children were afraid of me. They were more afraid of me than they were of their daddy when he was drunk, and with good reason. If they spilled a glass of milk on a white tablecloth, I punished them unmercifully. And I insisted on the white tablecloth. Why, I'll never know. They were afraid to bring home the grade card if they had a C on it, because I would not tolerate failure. Failure had been bred out of me, and I thought it was a gross human weakness. And my husband was ashamed of me. I didn't come to this program to get my husband sober. I came here to see if I could pick up some of the pieces of me. And I knew that they were doing some quite wonderful things in the field of mental health with group therapy. And so I came to the meeting. And I listened with tongue-in-cheek, I'm afraid, when the members spoke of prayer and meditation, because I didn't believe it. And so I started very mechanically at first to put the principles of this program to work on me. just mechanically putting them to work. And things began to change. At first, I noticed that the children could relax around me. They're so relaxed now they sass me. And then when I could laugh at myself, I knew I was getting well. And then I realized that Bill was proud of me again. But even greater than these things was the awareness that I belonged to something. I never belonged to anything in my life. I grew up in construction camps around the country, and I never belonged anywhere. I'd never belonged to a school. Didn't go to one more than one semester till I reached high school age. Never belonged to a church. You don't go to church when you don't believe in God. Or at least you shouldn't. Never belonged to a community. We didn't stay in one long enough. But now I belong to the most wonderful group of people in the world. And I made friends. At first, just in my own little group. And then they made me delegate, Al-Anon delegate for the whole state of Texas. And I made friends all over the state. And I got to go to New York. And I met our beloved Bill and Lois, this wise little Yankee lady who knew everything there was to know about me and who loved me because of it. I made friends all over the world. And some of you told me that you liked me. And so then I belonged to the human race. Everything I have came from the principles of this program. Our children are grown now. We're starting on the grandchildren. This program gave me, it gave me more than I asked for. It certainly gave me more than I deserved. It gave me more than I ever dreamed of. But it has a price tag for all of us. These things don't come for free. The message that is carried in our program is a message that the whole world needs to know. It can free the spirit of the tyranny that is alcoholism and instill the spirit of hope. Hope will never die, not as long as men breathe. It will burn low at times, and it's up to us to keep that flame alive for those who follow us. And we're the only ones who can carry this message. In this town, and in my town, there are drunken men and women who will not live to see the light of another day, who will never know they're alcoholic unless we carry this message. In this town and in my town, there are women who will not have the courage to face another day with an alcoholic, and they'll break up their home unless we carry this message. In this town and in my town, there are frightened children. Children who are afraid for their daddy to come home, who dread for night to come. This is Saturday, and Saturday nights were the worst of all, remember? If we do not carry this message to these people, God have mercy on them. And God have mercy on us. Thank you.
Arbutus. The message of the Al-Anon family groups is one of hope. It is the story of men and women who once felt helpless, lost, and lonely because of alcoholism of a loved one. Today, these men and women have courage and confidence. They have found understanding friends. They have learned about the simple things they can do to help themselves and which indirectly can help their alcoholic relatives, whether sober or not. Thank you very much, Arbutus. I have two announcements to make. One, we have a Chicago Waitress Union local card that has been found. Pauline is the name on it. It will be back at the registration desk. And secondly, there will be a 30-minute coffee break, and the program will resume at 2:30. Thank you.